The Pentagon says it's sending a sophisticated missile defense system to Israel. The deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Battery, known as THAAD, will also see U.S. troops deployed to operate it. The announcement came just hours after Iran warned the U.S. to keep its military forces out of Israel, and as the Israeli government considers its response to Tehran's missile attack at the start of the month. Israeli authorities are also dealing with the aftermath of a Hezbollah drone attack on an army base on Sunday. The strike near the city of Binyamina left at least 4 soldiers dead and injured dozens of people. In a statement, the Iran-backed militant group described the strike as a, quote, complex operation and warned Israel that worse is to come if it continues its offensive in Lebanon.
It was Hezbollah's deadliest attack on Israel since it began its ground invasion of Lebanon at the start of the month. 4 Israeli soldiers were killed and many others, including civilians, were injured in a drone strike on a military base. Hezbollah said the attack was retaliation for Israeli strikes on Beirut and threatened to step up its campaign. While the two sides have been trading fire almost daily since the war in Gaza began a year ago, the fighting has escalated. With Israel's Iron Dome air defense system, it's rare for so many to be hurt or killed.
There were many wounded by the blast and by shrapnel. Many people were seriously injured. This is a major incident in terms of casualties.
Meanwhile, Israel is pressing ahead with its ground offensive in southern Lebanon, as well as airstrikes on the capital, Beirut. Israel is now at war on 2 fronts, with Hezbollah in Lebanon and with Hamas in Gaza. The government has said it will also strike Iran in retaliation for a missile attack it launched earlier this month.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by DW's Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem and journalist Ruth Michelson in Beirut. Tanya, let's start with that Hezbollah drone attack that killed 4 soldiers, Israeli soldiers. What do we know?
Well, the Israeli military has now confirmed that indeed this drone attack hit a military base with those 4 soldiers being killed. About 60 were injured, and the names of those soldiers were just now released. According to rescue services there from last night, when it happened in the early evening, these were very difficult scenes. Now, it is seen here as the most significant attack in this war between Hezbollah and Israel over the past weeks and months. That is actually an attack away from the front line. And this is also what Hezbollah said in their statement, that they're able to inflict this sort of damage and that they're able to carry out such attacks deep inside Israel. Now, the focus here in Israel is right now on why there was no alarm or air raid sirens that went off. Now, according to first, an initial investigation, there were apparently 2 drones. One was shot down over the Mediterranean. These are so-called suicide drones. They're loaded with explosive, and the other one might have been, flying very low to the ground. But this is still being examined, and of course, this shows that Hezbollah, at least that's what's being discussed here, is adapting its tactics and trying to overwhelm Israel's air defenses to get to targets inside Israel.
The U.S., Tanya, has announced it's sending an advanced missile defense system to Israel along with American troops to operate it. How is this news being received in Israel?
Well, I think it's seen here that this deployment of this defense system is just adding an additional layer to Israel's air defense. You have here the Iron Dome, David Sling, or the Arrow system. And that, of course, comes while everyone here is waiting for Israel's retaliation to the missile attack by Iran about 2 weeks ago. Now, this system is designed to shoot down the short range to intermediate ballistic missiles, the likes that have been used by Iran, targeting Israel. it will come also with about, that's being said here, 100 US troops that have to be on the ground to operate the system. Now, it is certainly significant. It's not the first time this system is being deployed in the Middle East. It has been here also for a drill in Israel at a certain point, but right now it will be operational and support Israel in its air defense, and that's of course seen as the support of the US Israel is given here in this conflict.
Ruth, you're in Beirut. Israeli forces have clashed with Hezbollah fighters in southern Lebanon. What more can you tell us about that?
Well, we know that there was fighting in southern Lebanon, as you say, yesterday, and quite likely well into this morning. We know that yesterday this fighting took place in two villages along the de facto border, the village of Blida and a border village called Kauza. Hezbollah said yesterday that it fired on Israeli forces with machine guns in Blida. It claimed to kill an unspecified number of Israeli troops as they tried to enter the village. The Israeli military said that it carried out about 200 airstrikes in Lebanon over the past 24 hours. And we know that the Lebanese state media has said that Israel carried out airstrikes in locations across Lebanon, particularly in places like Baalbek, where there are ancient ruins, and also in the country's northeast. And in addition to this, in addition to the fighting that has been happening along the Blue Line and the airstrikes, the Lebanese Red Cross mentioned yesterday that there was an ambulance team that was struck twice while they were responding to a previous airstrike in the village of Sabine. They said that there were volunteers that were lightly injured when they were searching for casualties inside a house, and the house was struck a second time.
Now, in connection with all of this, the UN is locked in a dispute with Israel over another alleged attack on a UN peacekeepers base in Lebanon. It's the latest incident involving the UNIFIL force. Israel's Prime Minister has called on the organization to withdraw its peacekeepers, but the UN says they're going nowhere.
Major international criticism has followed Israel's attacks on UNIFIL. At least 5 UN troops have been wounded. Israeli forces say Hezbollah operates near to UNIFIL, with this footage supposedly showing a Hezbollah weapons cache found less than 500 meters from the UN base. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Hezbollah was using UNIFIL as human shields and called on the UN force to leave the area.
Mr. Secretary General, get the UNIFIL forces out of harm's way. It should be done right now, immediately.
The UN has condemned the attacks on its peacekeepers and described them as a breach of international law.
Well, still with us are DW's Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem and journalist Ruth Michelson in Beirut. Ruth, the UN peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, UNIFIL, says its soldiers were injured by Israeli tank fire and that an Israeli tank crashed through the main gate of one of its compounds. Are those kinds of incidents likely to continue?
Well, unfortunately, this was the latest in a string of incidents that we have seen around UNIFIL positions, UNIFIL bases in southern Lebanon. And there are fears that these peacekeepers remain very much at risk. There was a statement from the spokesman from the UN Secretary General on Sunday talking about how the door of one of the entrance door of one of the UN positions on the base was deliberately breached by Israeli armored vehicles. He described the incident as deeply worrying. You played the comments from the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying that the simplest way to avoid these incidents and further would be to remove UNIFIL forces from the danger zone, as the spokesman for the UN Secretary General has pointed out. Any group targeting peacekeepers is in violation of international law. It would potentially be a breach of international law to make these demands, or at very least it would be unreasonable to expect these peacekeepers to leave their bases because of the demands from one party. So we've seen continued statements from the UN Secretary General and his spokesman saying that these peacekeepers, their facilities should never be a target, and reiterating that any group doing so, either party, is in violation of international humanitarian law.
Tanya, Prime Minister Netanyahu has asked UNIFIL peacekeepers to leave southern Lebanon. Why does he want those troops out?
This has been the position of the Israeli government, all along, and this comes, of course, also after strong condemnation that those UNIFIL positions were hit, and some of the UNIFIL peacekeepers there were injured in recent days. Now, Netanyahu has put out this stark warning, basically saying that Hezbollah is using UNIFIL as hostages and human shields, and that UNIFIL should leave its positions, as we just heard. Also, the Israeli military has said that Hezbollah is deliberately, what they are saying, operating close to UNIFIL positions. They also put out some videos talking to reporters there yesterday, explaining their point of view and saying, it's seen here as that Israel wants to, of course, fight there without restraint, without having these UNIFIL positions there on the ground. But as we just heard, UNIFIL has refused to leave their positions. They're there on a mandate from the UN Security Council, and they're actually there to oversee and monitor the situation in southern Lebanon.
Tanya, Ruth, thank you very much. That was DW's Tanya Kramer in Jerusalem and journalist Ruth Michelson in Beirut.